Hello, and welcome to Decaf, a production of the Beacon Center of Tennessee. Taylor and Mark are back with you, and boy, oh boy, is it great to be here in the year of our Lord 2024 with some fresh, new, exciting poll results. Before we get into what we get paid to talk about, I would be remiss if I did not say that if I was not getting married in 2024, I would not be so happy about this year. I will drink out of my Alabama cups until the day that I die, and I will love the Crimson Tide till the day that I die. But I know that people who listen to this podcast get immense pleasure in Alabama's downfall because of me. And to all the people that text me about it, you got what you wanted. Mark couldn't be happier because he won his bets and hates Alabama. Um, but I'll just say go Huskies for the next week because I would never cheer for Michigan.
But we're on the same page.
So
I'm ready
that.
I'm ready for the Huskies as well. I hope that Washington is able to win. And the biggest issue is Alabama should not have been there in the first place, and that was my biggest issue the whole time. I don't usually root against Alabama that hard. I'm usually okay, but they did not deserve to be there. That should have been Florida State. So say what we want, but that is the biggest issue. But we should see a good national championship game. I'm excited. It'll be very close. I think I have Michigan, but I'm cheering for Washington.
You said say what you won't, and I won't because we would be on here for an hour because I got a lot to say. But yeah, go Washington, never Michigan again. Boo Harbaugh. Okay, so to what we're talking about now. It is January 4th, which means it is poll result day at the Beacon Center. We've had the poll results for a minute, and we want to fill you in on everything that went down and how Tennesseans are feeling about policy issues and political issues as of January 2024. With the legislative session starting next week, I think it's important for us to really understand what Tennesseans are thinking because the things that are going to be going on over the next few months will directly impact their wallets, how they're able to provide for their family and their livelihoods. And so we need to know where Tennesseans land on some of these important issues. Plus, it's also fun to know where Tennesseans land, especially on issues of national politics, which is what we're going to get into first. There will be a U.S. Senate race in 2024 in Tennessee. There will be a presidential election in 2024. Things are getting spicy this year. So, Mark, let's jump in and let's start smaller and get bigger. Starting smaller, something that's only pertinent to Tennessee right now, U.S. Senate election. The Democratic primary is heating up. There are a lot of voters who are undecided. What did the results say, and what do you take from that?
Well, let's start with where we were at last time. So Marsha Blackburn kind of led the field of Democratic candidates. But what's interesting is Marquita Bradshaw actually performed better than Gloria Johnson against her. She was only down by 12, where I think Gloria Johnson was down by 20. So let's fast forward to this time, and we actually just did a Democratic primary. So we know Marquita Bradshaw performs better in the general election. Does she perform better in the primary? The answer is a resounding no, she does not. Gloria Johnson is just hammering her. She's up by 30 points. But like what you said, really important is Gloria Johnson at 41, Marquita Bradshaw at 11. But the plurality of voters, 45%, say, I'm not sure. So they still don't know who they're voting for. And that's a really big number. With that being said, Gloria Johnson is in a really good position because essentially, Marquita Bradshaw have to win about 4 out of every 5 of those voters in order to make up, a 30-point disadvantage. So she's in a good spot. She's raised a lot of money, and she's clearly starting to spend it. So right now, I think Vegas would certainly say Gloria Johnson is the favorite to face off against Marsha Blackburn in the general election.
But that number, we cannot emphasize that enough. That is a huge number that is undecided. And it depends on these candidates left to who can get those 45% of voters. Of course, they won't all go to one or the other, but 45% of voters, that's a lot of voters to snatch up. And it depends on how you spend your money, what you're saying. Can you resonate with them? I will be interested in our next poll, which will be in April, which we'll talk about more later, to see if either campaign or the third candidate that is running can close that gap a little bit and turn some of those undecideds into sold out positive votes.
And let me add one thing too, because I think it's important is we don't know necessarily what this voter universe is going to look like. Because in Tennessee, you're able to choose whatever primary you want to vote in. And some of that could depend on what happens to the presidential race. For example, if, the Democratic primary is also not for president, they say, oh, the Republican primary is competitive, a Democrat could say, I'm going to vote in the Republican primary. And then vice versa. If, say Trump is the nominee, and they say, well, I'm interested to vote in this Democratic primary for whatever reason.
Yeah.
There used to be the Operation Chaos, but if you looked at our last poll, Republicans certainly prefer Marquita Bradshaw over Gloria Johnson. And a number of them said they would vote for her over Marsha Blackburn. So this is tough, and it's a small sample size. I really want to reiterate that. It's only about 300 and something, Democratic likely voters. So there's a lot of time left, and I would be I wouldn't want to make too many assumptions based on these numbers, other than the fact that if you're Gloria Johnson right now, you have to feel pretty good about the results.
Absolutely. Well, I mean, that's spicy in itself, but I think that some of our presidential election results are even spicier. We asked some really fascinating questions this time. One that I think is most fascinating, which we'll get to in a second, Mark, I want you to go through the numbers of Trump versus Biden versus RFK, because those seem to be the top three front runners. But then we asked, what if the front runners didn't run? And that is what I think is like such it boggles my mind that we even asked that question, but I love that we did, and I love to see what people said. So, Mark, kind of go through some of those poll results for me, and tell us what it looked like.
Well, essentially everything is unchanged from last time. Trump was beating
Sure.
Biden by 31 points head to head. This time he's winning by 32, so very minimal change. Last time when you put RFK Jr. in, Trump led Biden by 25 points. He now leads by 26 points, so it's very similar. RFK Jr.'s number dropped a bit. I think it went from 21% to 16%. Still a really high number for a third party candidate, but it's essentially unchanged from last time. And we did the Republican primary too, where Trump is just running away with it. He's up by 60 points on Ron DeSantis. One note I would say is that nationally, it seems like Nikki Haley's picking up a lot of steam as kind of the, alternate to Trump. Not in Tennessee. She's a clear third at 7%. I mean, they have all, the field is pretty limited to those three. I think Ramaswamy's at 2%. But it really is kind of, Trump by a mile, and then DeSantis, and then Haley in the pecking order.
But the question of who would you vote for if Trump or if Biden did not run in these primaries, that to me, the Republican primary result was not entirely surprising, but the Democratic primary result I thought was absolutely fascinating. Mark, walk us through what happened there.
Well, I agree with you completely on that. I think the Democratic one was very surprising based on kind of what our preconceived notion is. So if Joe Biden were not to run for whatever reason, if he retired, if he chose not to run, if they forced him out, whatever, the favorite of Democratic primary voters would actually be Kamala Harris at 27% support. She has been really lambasted because of her really poor approval ratings. But if Biden doesn't run, she is the favorite of Democratic voters in Tennessee. Now, I will mention that 27% is much less than the front run on the Republican side. So it's not any kind of referendum on anybody. It's saying she's barely the front runner, and she is followed closely by Bernie Sanders at 19%, the 2020 nominee, 2016 nominee Hillary Clinton at 18%. So those are the top three. Now, what is super interesting is the media has been trying to push Gavin Newsom as this guy, where if Biden would not run, that he's the guy. Not in Tennessee. He comes in around 12%, which is way behind those three. And despite the idea that the whole media is making him seem like the heir apparent if Biden doesn't run. And then Secretary of Transportation Buttigieg comes in at 9%.
I mean, I think that's so fascinating that on the Republican primary side, which you'll be able to see on our website, Ron DeSantis absolutely runs away with it if Trump doesn't win. But on the Democratic side, it's so close that even the front runner of Vice President Kamala Harris doesn't even have 10% over the next candidate that would be in line. That to me is fascinating. And you're right, the media golden boy, California Governor Gavin Newsom, way down there, fourth place among Tennesseans. And so you have to wonder, like, is the media out of touch or is Tennessee an outlier? And I think you know what I think, and I think we'll talk about that a little bit later.
I'll give Gavin Newsom some credit. He has a great PR team. That guy does excellent PR where
Oh
he
yeah.
makes him. I mean, he's on Fox News. He's debating people, and he's acting like he's the heir apparent. It seems like people kind of bought that, but yeah, our poll shows that he is definitely not the first choice of Democratic voters. And like you said, not only is Kamala Harris only at 27%, that is, I mean, she's that's 1/4 of the electorate. That means there's like 73% who prefer someone else. So that would be really interesting if that happened. The Republican one's a little bit is interesting as well in a different way. So if Trump doesn't run, DeSantis is the clear front runner. 46% of Republican primary voters, clear in a way the guy. Now, what's interesting is if you take, you look at the normal one, you expect Nikki Haley second. She is not.
Mm-hmm.
She's only at 14%. So if Trump doesn't run, she doesn't get that much of a bump. Who does get the bump is Vivek Ramaswamy, who's up from 2% to 18%, which makes a lot of sense because he's really aligned himself with President Trump in the primary.
Yes.
So the idea is if for some reason Trump were not to run, whether it was legal or was his choice or whatever, that Ramaswamy would probably be the choice of many of his supporters. Although, like we see, DeSantis would probably be the choice of more of them.
Well, we also asked about that legal question and the conviction question. And interestingly, even if Trump is convicted of the crimes that he has been accused of, Tennesseans are still going to vote for him. Some of them give it a conditional response. It depends on what the crimes are. But overwhelmingly, right, Mark? I mean, Tennesseans are still in.
Yeah, big time. I mean, and I do think that, truthfully, the national media has done a bad job representing this question. There's been a lot of polls like, 90% said they'd vote for him whether he's convicted or not. We asked the question that I think is a lot better than most of the polls because, like you said, we put a conditional response. So if he was charged one or more of the crimes, 63% of Trump voters said they'd still vote for him. What's interesting is 22% of voters said it would depend on the specific circumstances. Which I think, I think that's a fair response. And I think that people view the charges differently, right? They might view this, whatever the New York one of, paying off Stormy Daniels potentially as maybe not that big of a deal. Maybe some of the election related ones, if something else were to come out they don't know currently, that could be a bigger deal. So 22% said they're not sure they might vote for him. It depends on the specifics. And 9% said they definitely would not vote for him. But I really feel like, truthfully, the national media has done a bad job representing that because they only ask, would you vote for him or not? And there's more, people are more nuanced than just yes or no. It depends. It depends what happens specifically. So I think our question was so much better than anything we've seen. But yeah, the truth is that most Trump voters are with him no matter what. And I think a lot of them see this as, he was unfairly charged. He was, put in this position because of, liberal DAs or liberal politicians. So in their mind, it's like, it doesn't matter to me. I'm going to vote for him either way.
I do think, and we'll get to that national media trust and distrust and what people think of it shortly, but I think that is a really good indicator if you're really looking into the results. Do people trust the national media? Does what the national media say have any effect on them or how they vote? But before we get to the fun questions, let's talk about what I think are the most fun questions, which are our policy questions. If you have been watching the news at all in the last month, you will remember that recently Governor Lee announced his intention for his Educational Freedom Scholarship Program, which would essentially be a statewide education savings account for all Tennessee students and families to be eligible for. If you remember last year, there is currently an ESA program for Davidson County, Shelby County, and Hamilton County. Governor Lee proposed a program for the entire state. And we asked about Tennesseans' favorability of that, and the results were enough to make my heart sing. Mark, let's hear them.
Yeah, well, ultimately, there's been a lot of talk about ESAs in the past few months, and you would expect the results would look a lot different than they did, when we polled this about 6 months ago. They don't. They look almost identical to when we polled them. The approval went down from 69% to 68%, so 1 point, and the disapproval went up 2 points. So it's essentially unchanged, even when you attach Governor Lee's name to it, which we did in the question. We asked the question the same way, basically asking people if they would support this overall, and we mentioned the fact that it's private schools, but we mentioned that it was Governor Lee's plan, and it just didn't change pretty much anything, which is. I think it's really interesting, and it shows that there is widespread support for ESAs or for educational choice at a statewide level. And same as we saw before, really popular among Republicans. 85% of Republicans support it. Popular among everyone. 56% of Democrats, 56% of independents support it. So it's a very popular concept going into the legislative session.
And I think that that everyone should know that. I mean, what were the numbers? We also asked another question about, would you be more or less likely to vote for your legislator if they did or didn't support a program like this? And support for school choice heavily impacts people's votes, does it not, Mark?
Yeah, I mean, when you're talking about over 50% of people, that's a huge deal. So, according to that, 51% of Tennesseans said they would be more likely to vote for a legislator that supports statewide ESAs. 11% said they'd be more likely to vote against them, and 27% said it wouldn't make a difference in their vote. So, yeah, I mean, when you're talking about over half of the state would be more likely to vote for a legislator who supports educational choice, that's a strong number. And, truthfully, the overall numbers are important, but that might make legislators take a little bit more note of that when you say this could be my job. So it's an interesting tidbit. Still a pretty decent percentage, about a quarter of Tennesseans said, a lot of them might support, but they said it wouldn't impact their vote. But 51% of people said it would make them more likely to vote for them, which is a very big number.
Yeah, that's a strong number that should be at the front of every mind going into this session. Property tax cap. We also asked about that. So in the last few years, local governments have been raising property taxes. I'm sure we all remember what happened in 2020 when the businesses were shut down and Nashville increased by 34%. As a matter of fact, we featured property tax increases in our pork report this year because they have been so egregious. And some may argue that it should stop, or it should be at least limited as to what local governments can do when it comes to increasing property taxes. And honey, the Tennesseans agree. I think these numbers are a very strong indicator that Tennesseans are sick and tired of their property taxes going up, up, and up, and they don't really trust their local governments to stop doing that. Mark, what were the numbers?
Well, I mean, the number we'll start with is the lowest number, which is only 11% of voters think we should leave property taxes as they are now, which is strictly up to the local mayor and the city council or county commission. So that they do not like it the way it is. Now, people are split otherwise, but 74% of voters do believe the state government should get involved in some way in terms of regulating property taxes. 35% supported a straight up property tax cap, saying you can't raise it more than this. That's it, 3-4%, whatever the number is. And then another 39% thought there should be some combination of statewide regulation with local decision making. So it's saying not one or the other fully, but some kind of connection. But they want the state government involved, which they are not currently involved. Now, when you ask the specific question of would you support a property tax cap if the property tax increases had to be approved by voter referendum, meaning, yes, say that whatever, Hamilton County wants to raise taxes by 20%. You get to vote on whether they get to raise it 20% or not. It's up to you. So it's not just saying you can or can't. It's saying you get to decide. And when you put it that way, 67% of Tennesseans agreed that they would support that property tax cap. Only 13% disagreed. And not surprisingly, an astonishing 80% of Republicans agreed that there should be a property tax cap with the voter referendum attached.
I've said it a million times. If you want to raise our taxes, just convince me as to why. Tell me my trash is going to be picked up and not that it's going to go to another dumb stadium or pickleball court. Like, you know what I mean? Like, if you want to raise them and you want to provide goods and services and fix the road out in front of my house that's got a giant pothole in it, then let's talk. But if you're going to try to raise it and your pitch is, I want to build a pickleball court and give a fast food chain $1 bajillion, then there's no discussion to be had. And I think that a lot of people feel that way. I think that there's been a lot of egregious cases of government just spending money on frivolous things, frivolous to us. Of course, it looks good on their resumes, but frivolous to us. And people are getting sick of it. Like, times are tight. Grocery bills have gone up like four times over the last 10 years. Like, give me a break. Don't raise my taxes unless you're going to pick up my trash and come wash my car every week. That's not even the real government. I don't even want that.
Yeah. I think the idea is too that people, whether or not you think property taxes should go up, not go up, whatever, I think that, people expect to plan for things. And, some of these places are, like we said, raising property taxes 50, 60, 70% in some of these places. So you can't, if you're on a tight budget, you can't plan. So I do think that's where a lot of the, emphasis came on. And I think it's really telling that only 11% of people are like, yeah, let's keep it as it is now. People want a change when it comes to property taxes in some way, and they basically want to not stop paying so much of property taxes and want the state government involved a little bit more so that they're not, having to pay huge percentages.
I totally agree. Well, There are a lot of great results, and you can see them all at beaconpoll.com. But before we kind of wrap up, we also wouldn't be ourselves if we didn't ask some fun questions. And if you've listened to this podcast ever before in your entire life, you will know that Mark and I, we applaud our local media when they do good things. We also call it out when it's not so good. But the national media is not always a friend of ours. And honey, it's not a friend to most Tennesseans either. We asked Tennesseans how much they trust national media versus their local media. And the results to me were not surprising. What about you, Mark?
Actually, they were kind of surprising to me. I'm surprised how much they do trust the national media based on what we're
Oh,
seeing.
fair.
It's not a huge number, and and I think when you go to the idea of trusting it a lot, it really drops down. So for the national
Hmm.
media, only 22%, or I'm sorry, 51% of Tennesseans say that they have some trust in the media. It could be a lot of trust or a medium amount of trust, and 51% said that. 66% of people said they trust local media to some extent, which is a big,
Hmm.
that's a big number. But when you go to how many people trust them a lot, right, only 11% trust national media a lot, while 22% trust them at all. And the local media is kind of a flip
Yeah.
number where 15% trust it a lot, only 9% don't trust local news at all. So it's interesting. It kind of goes to this general thing that, all of it's local. I do happen to think that we have a lot better statewide media outlets or local media outlets in the state than national. People do agree. But honestly, I feel pretty good if I'm local media saying 66% of people trust us to some extent. Yeah, it might not be a
At
lot.
least a little.
They do trust us sometimes. Yeah, national media. There's a lot of people who don't trust them a lot, but there is some trust in it. I think a lot of people are like, oh, I'm not really sure. And national media is an entire big thing,
Yeah.
right? That could include CNN, it could include Fox News, it could include MSNBC. So whatever side you're on, you might trust some of it. But it's interesting, and it kind of goes with what we expect in the way that, yeah, local media is just more trusted. It's closer to the people. It's more local. And I think you're
Mhm.
less likely to think that it's, super politically motivated.
Yeah, I totally agree. And, you see your local news anchors and stuff at the gym and at the grocery store and your newspaper reporters and stuff. And you're more likely to trust people you see a lot, whereas a lot of the national media anchors and stars are just that. They're stars. And people don't really you don't really trust that, especially when they're fighting at each other all the time.
Let me tell you who's a star is Dennis Ferrier. I went to listen to
Uh,
this. I went to a coffee with him. I try to catch up with media people. I like Dennis a lot. I consider him a
mhm.
friend. We went there. It's like everyone knew who he was. And people were coming up to him saying, "Hey, I know you. I love you." It was crazy. It felt like he was a celebrity I was sitting with. And even people who didn't say stuff, like they'd walk into the coffee shop like, "I recognize you." It's crazy. He is he is the closest thing we have to a national celebrity. But it is wild, sitting there and just having people, person after person after person, recognize him. Like, nobody recognizes me. I'm just sitting there like, well, I guess I'll just kind of sit in
Yeah.
the back seat here.
It's just Mark.
Yeah, that's right.
Wouldn't wish hometown fame on a better person. Um One other interesting result that we asked, and I actually did not know we were asking this question until the results came back, and I thought it was really funny, especially considering I went to Trader Joe's last night for my weekly grocery haul, and Blake and I eat salmon like pretty much once a week. Like we're salmon eaters, and there was not a single fresh salmon in sight. There was also no lettuce. Basically, all the healthy foods were gone, and it checks out because we asked Tennesseans to pick all of the potential New Year's resolutions that apply. And we gave them a lot of options. The number one choice that everyone picked had something to do with weight management and personal health. And listen, good for you guys. Okay, but I'm not darkening the doors of the YMCA in Green Hills until all y'all get sick of exercising next month. And I can't wait to go back to Trader Joe's and get my fresh salmon and all my little veggies. Even the cucumbers were gross. I'm like, guys, there's always a million cucumbers here. What y'all doing? But I did think that was like really interesting that most of the top 5 selections had to do with mental health, physical health, or financial health. Mental health also encompassing health of their relationships. But I don't know, Mark, I'm not a New Year's resolution girl. Like, I don't really Do you do that? I
Yeah,
don't do that.
I have a big Excel sheet of all the things I want to do. I know I'm weird because I always like a starting point. So like, if I eat really unhealthy Friday, I'll be like, well, I'll start eating well Monday. Like I need a starting
do
point.
do
And New Year's,
that.
and honestly, I know a lot of people don't do their New Year's resolutions. I tend to do mine, not 100% what I want, but I tend to try to stick with them. So I'm kind of having and I think that the key is, from my opinion, is that you got to give yourself a little bit of leeway. So it's like, if I say, I'm not going to drink this year, it's like, yeah, I'm not going to drink, say, 42 out of 52 weeks, something like that, where you give yourself a little leeway, but like, I'm trying to do, I got this one wrong, but 10,000 steps a day, which I accidentally said is 1,000 steps a day in our team meeting, and everyone thought I was everyone thought I was the laziest person ever because I said my goal is to do 1,000 steps a day. It's like, you can go to the bathroom, so 10,000 steps a day. But I kind of did that in like, I actually want to do 70,000 steps a week, so I don't have to make that every day, and it's a lot easier if you miss a day or not. So I do care, and most of mine were on par with the top ones there. I think the weight loss, fitness improvement's good. The managing money better, and the mindfulness for sure. I mean, one of my real goals is to make sure I'm more positive this year and kind of look at the bright side of things and not be so negative or down when something bad happens.
Well, Blake and I are shredding for the wedding, as we call it. I heard it on a Bravo show.
As you call everyone calls it that. That's been like a thing for 10 years.
I've never known that people call it that. I just heard it on one of my Bravo shows.
Oh, gosh.
But that's what we are doing. But we also started it in November. So it's not really a New Year's resolution, but we are getting on that fitness grind, which made me so mad to see all these little healthy girls in their leggings, like reading all of the labels of these foods and not knowing what they were. So like, I'll see y'all in a month. Actually, I won't see y'all in a month because I'm going to take walks outside and do YouTube workouts until the Y is no longer absolutely slammed.
Try not to shame them. It's good that they're trying to make themselves better. Let's be positive about this. Be like, hey, good for you. You're trying to improve yourself.
You're trying to improve yourself, and I will see the employees of the YMCA in Green Hills in 1 month when everybody.
And hopefully you'll also see the same people. That's the goal, right? If not, then you have more time.
You're way more positive than I am because you probably got all your groceries that you wanted this weekend.
I don't even get groceries. Like that should be my thing, is stop ordering so much Uber Eats. That should be my number one goal.
That should be your thing. That absolutely should be your thing. Well, before we head out, let's just tell everyone, thank you for supporting our poll. Thank you for supporting us. Thank you for reading and listening to all the things that we do. Beaconpoll.com is where you can find all the results, interactive results, really pretty maps of what voters think over time, and all of the crosstabs, everything like that. And in April, you'll get another one. That's the great thing about a quarterly poll. You just keep getting more. We're so thankful to be able to work in an organization that lets us do a fun little project like this. It's not really a little project, it's a big project, but a fun project like this, that we get to really see what Tennesseans think. Because if we were just in our Beacon office with all 13 of us just deciding what to work on, who would we be helping? So it's really great to be able to see what Tennesseans think of things, gut check our assumptions as policy nerds, and then move forward to better serve people and keep Tennessee free. Also this year, Beacon is celebrating 20 years, and you're going to hear a lot more about that. But 2024 is our birthday year. We're 20. I don't know if 20 is like a milestone that you can actually do anything like as a person.
Now, we can't drink as an organization yet, almost.
We can't drink as an organization yet. We can't even rent a car yet. But 20 years is still a really big deal. And you're going to hear a lot more about that soon. But right now, as you sign off from listening to this, visit beaconpoll.com, check through those results, see what you agree with, see what you think is weird, and let us know. And if there are questions that you think would be interesting to ask Tennesseans, we are all ears. We want to know, because Mark's got a lot of creativity in there, but we've gotten good suggestions in the past. So don't be shy. Send them to us.
And let me say two more things. If it wasn't for John Becker, he's from WBIR. He's the one who gave me that idea to ask the local national media question. So that was a great suggestion by him, one of the anchors there. And we're going to be talking about it tonight on WBIR. And last but not least, I need to thank the people who are behind the scenes who do this. Taylor does the entire website. She did that. Dylan and Olivia, our former intern, who still kind of, works for us sometimes. Did a great job fact checking, looking at all the numbers, making sure we have Randy, our excellent pollster, and Macy, our incredible graphic designer, got everything done in, one day. It was
So fast.
really fantastic. So we have a great team here. We're lucky to have them. This is a lot. You see the final product, but it takes a lot of time to get to that final product. And, without the team that I have doing that, we would not get it done so quickly.
Yeah, releasing a poll right after you get back from the holidays is not for the faint of heart, which is, I think, why I have such puffy eyes right now. But we made it. It is out in the world. You can see it now. And Mark and I will sleep for the next 48 hours. So thank you for listening. Thank you for watching. Thank you for supporting. Visit beaconpoll.com. You won't regret it. Let us know what you think. For the Beacon Center of Tennessee, this has been Decaf. If you don't already, you should subscribe on Apple Podcasts, Spotify, or wherever you get your podcast. We'll catch you next week.